All right, let's get into it. We've all heard the story of Joseph and his coat of many colors, right? But what if that famous coat was just the opening act? What if the real story is actually hidden in the details, in a very specific price, a long-forgotten trade route, and a pattern that echoes through centuries? Today, we're going to unpack one of the most famous stories ever told and find the clues that have been hiding in plain sight all along. It all kicks off right here. This single verse from Genesis, it basically sets the whole stage. And this isn't some minor detail. No, this is the emotional heart of the entire conflict. Jacob's favoritism, it wasn't quiet or subtle. It was loud. It was public. You could wear it. And it was about to absolutely tear his family apart. So, first up, let's just talk about the coat itself and the immediate chaos it caused. Because this is about so much more than a piece of clothing. It's about what that clothing screamed to everyone who saw it.
You know, the original Hebrew phrase is ketonet pasim, and while we all know it as the coat of many colors, scholars debate what it really means. Could be a long-sleeved robe, maybe a full-length one, but here's the thing, it almost doesn't matter. Whatever the specifics, this was a VIP garment. It was basically a public announcement that Joseph was special, that he was the chosen one.
And the fallout? It was instant, and it was ugly. The Bible says his brothers hated him and could not speak peaceably to him. I mean, they couldn't even manage a simple hello. This one gift poisoned everything. It cranked up the envy, it completely destroyed communication, and then, when Joseph starts sharing his dreams about them all bowing down to him, well, that simmering resentment just boiled over into a full-blown murder plot. And that very coat, that symbol of Jacob's love, would eventually be brought back to him, covered in blood, to become the symbol of his deepest grief.
Okay, so now the story shifts. It goes from a family drama to something like a historical detective story. The act of betrayal itself holds this incredible clue, and it all boils down to one simple number.
20 shekels of silver. That's it. That was the going rate for Joseph. It's the amount his brothers got when they decided, hey, let's not kill him, let's just sell him into slavery. It seems like such a stark, random number, but believe me, it is an amazing historical key.
Now this is where it gets really fascinating. Archaeologists have dug up records from all over the ancient Near East. And what they've found is that the price for a slave changed over time, because of inflation. And get this, right around Joseph's time, the average price for a slave was 20 shekels. Exactly. A few centuries later, it was more than double that. And a few centuries after that, it was way, way higher. That number, 20 shekels, it's like a historical timestamp.
So here's the crucial question. If you were just making this story up hundreds of years after the fact, like some critics claim, why on earth would you use the number 20? You'd probably use a price that people in your time would recognize, right? The fact that the text uses the historically accurate, but by then totally outdated price of 20 shekels, it strongly suggests the person telling the story was working from a real, preserved memory of that time.
But the price isn't the only clue. Not even close. Let's dive into another detail that, at first glance, seems really confusing, but it actually paints an even more detailed historical picture.
And this is where we have to ask ourselves, are these little details, the price, the traders, what they were carrying, are they just flavor text for the story, or are they genuine echoes of a real world? Because the narrative is about to get even more specific, and even stranger.
Okay, so check this out. In the same story, the guys who buy Joseph are called Ishmaelites, but they're also called Midianites. So, which is it? For a long time, people pointed to this as proof that the story was just a clumsy mashup of two different versions. But what if it isn't a contradiction at all? What if it's actually a clue?
Well, archaeology has uncovered evidence of this very specific and kind of weird trade route that only really existed for a short period of time. You had traders from way up north, in Syria, who would travel all the way down to Arabia to buy expensive stuff like incense. Then they'd take this long, winding path all the way back up through a place called Gilead, past a town called Dothan, which is exactly where Joseph was, all on their way to the big markets in Egypt.
And here is the aha moment. This bizarre route, traders from Syria carrying goods from Arabia, traveling through Canaan to get to Egypt, it only makes economic sense in one very specific, very narrow window of history, the late Bronze Age. And the Bible says the traders came from Gilead with camels carrying spices to Egypt. It's a perfect match. Whoever wrote this knew the details of a trade pattern that had been gone for centuries.
So you have these amazing historical details that seem to pin the story to a real time and place. But for so many people, the story's meaning goes so much deeper. They see another layer here, a theological pattern that's pointing to an even bigger story down the road.
I mean, just look at this. You have Joseph, the beloved son, betrayed by his own brothers. He's sold for silver by a man named Judah. He's stripped of his special robe, he's falsely accused, and he suffers terribly, even though he's innocent. But through all that suffering, he ends up saving not just his family, but tons of other people. For centuries, readers have seen this as this powerful foreshadowing, a type of Jesus, the beloved son, betrayed by his own people, sold for silver by Judas, which is just the Greek version of the name Judah, who is also stripped, falsely accused, and through his suffering ends up saving all of humanity. The parallels are they're staggering.
And this all brings us to the ultimate point of the entire story. Because this whole narrative, it starts with some really ugly jealousy and betrayal, but it absolutely does not end there.
Years and years later, Joseph is basically the prime minister of Egypt. He's the second most powerful man in the known world, and he finally confronts the brothers who sold him into slavery. And this is what he says to them. He doesn't pretend what they did wasn't evil, but he reframes it. He shows them that even in their absolute worst, most hateful act, a bigger divine plan was at work, turning their act of evil into an act of salvation.
So that leaves us with this final massive idea to chew on. The story of Joseph seems to be anchored in these stunningly accurate historical details, but it also carries this profound, repeating pattern of redemption. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What if the oldest stories, the ones that stick with us, aren't just a record of what happened once? What if they're also a pattern, a blueprint, showing us how redemption works, not just in the past, but again and again, all throughout history?